Nigeria has secured $800 million from the World Bank to scale up its national social program ahead of its removal of its subsidy on petrol in June. It's part of Palliatives to cushion the negative effects of the subsidy removal plan. Finance Minister Zainab Ahmed says the government is considering cash transfers and mass transit buses for workers to ease the pain of the subsidy removal on the most vulnerable segment of its population. She says discussions are going on with members of the incoming administration of President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu on subsidy removal.
We've secured some funding from the World Bank. That is the first tranche of palliatives that will enable us give cash transfers to the most vulnerable in our society that have now been registered in a national social register. Today, that register has a list of 10 million households. 10 million households is equivalent to about 50 million Nigerians. But we also have to raise more resources to enable us do more than just the cash transfers, and also in our engagements with the various stakeholders, the various kind of asks that we have go beyond the requirement of just giving cash transfers. Labour, for example, might be looking for mass transit for its members. So there are several things that we're still planning and working on. Some we can start executing quickly, some are more medium term.
Well, there we have the Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, speaking about the plans of the government with regards to the removal of subsidy come June 2023 in line with the provisions of the PIA. Doctor, your thoughts on this?
Well, we've been on this subject forever. The only new piece of information is the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Ms. Ahmed, telling us that now we have $800 million from the World Bank, and that the $800 million from the World Bank is ready for disbursement. And that once the Nigerian government gains access to it, this is going to be given out under the National Social Investment Program, what is called the Conditional Cash Transfer Program, to 10 million households, which will translate into 50 million Nigerians. These 50 million Nigerians are those living in poverty and also who are considered to be vulnerable. Now, that social register was developed when we were dealing with the COVID-19 crisis in the country. And there were controversies at that time about, the integrity of Nigeria's social register to address extreme poverty, to address multidimensional poverty. Is there any guarantee in place that the same issue will not arise this time around? And what is the proportion of 50 million persons, as we've been told, out of over 200 million people? Because definitely, when the subsidy is removed, it's going to affect more than 50 million people. The second point to note here is that the Minister of Finance said, there is a social and economic cost to the removal of subsidy. Yes, the simple reason why the Buhari government decided to move the goalpost forward. When the petroleum industry bill was passed in 2021 and it was signed into law by President Muhammadu Buhari, one of the touchy points there was this idea of complete deregulation of the downstream sector. And to completely deregulate this downstream sector, you have to remove subsidy. But the government of the day, said, there will be consequences, it's better to move it. So the government moved it to June. The same position was sustained in the medium-term fiscal framework and the Appropriation Act for 2023. There's an echo. I'm not hearing myself. I don't know why that is the case. Okay. In other words, the point I'm trying to make is that this is also a matter of law. And what the Minister of Finance was doing there, she was saying, more or less, that, look, this is the PIA, This is the Appropriation Act 2023, the same law that the Buhari government decided to move forward. Hence, she says we're talking to the new government. So if the new administration comes in and it doesn't immediately remove subsidy, then it becomes an act of illegality, per se, as it were. So would the new administration also come and tell Nigerians, oh, we need to settle in and we will move it again? This is the big issue here that we are confronted with will be an indication of crisis with policy implementation. What is the third point? The third point is that we've been through this route before. In 2012, the Jonathan administration, going the same route of deregulation, which was starkly resisted by the same people who are in power now, who are now talking about subsidy, introduced what was called SureP, a reinvestment program. Money that will be saved will be used to provide palliatives. But we had, challenges with that, leading to the chairman of the SureP program, in fact, deciding that, he didn't want to be part of it anymore. What is the guarantee that in terms of management, even if these palliatives are provided, they will be properly managed? Palliatives with regard to transportation, with regards to agriculture, with regard to other social services. Given the controversy over the Nigerian Social Investment Program under this same APC government. The fourth point is that there seems to be a general agreement among economists, the professionals, that subsidy removal is not sustainable. In 2022 alone, in 11 months, Nigeria spent over 3 trillion naira on subsidy, otherwise called under recovery. But in the new dispensation, that cannot be sustained. You will need to abandon it and then use the money for development purposes. Then there is a fifth leg to it. The fifth leg is the objection that has been raised robustly by organized labor in Nigeria, saying that the issue is not about subsidy, it's about production. Organized labor, the Nigerian Labour Congress, through its spokespersons, says that if subsidy is removed, there will be a crisis in Nigeria. And they are not, making any, they are not dealing, they are not mealy-mouthing about that. They are very clear about what they think will happen. So can Nigeria afford what President Muhammadu Buhari himself referred to in shifting the goalposts to consequences in an interview with Bloomberg? So the future remains uncertain. The only thing that is certain is that the subsidy regime is unsustainable, but how does government manage it? And as a country, we don't seem to have a very sound reputation for proper management of policy. And so all of us are going to find ourselves in a place where we'll be doing policy analysis, policy evaluation. We did it with the redesign of national currency. We have not fully recovered from that. And now we have this other issue facing us.
Absolutely. Now, just as has been mentioned, the federal government of Nigeria has been able to secure $800 million from the World Bank to act as a form of safety net, a cushion for Nigerians in the short term following the eventual removal of subsidy. And as Dr. Bati rightly mentioned, following the PIA sign in 2021, there's a provision for 18 months for a full deregulation of petroleum in Nigeria. Now, the World Bank has not hidden its position on fuel subsidy, not just in Nigeria, but other African countries like that. However, in Nigeria, it has consistently maintained that Nigeria could perform better, especially bottom line and the economy, if subsidy is fully removed. Therefore, this support towards that, this intervention is not a surprise. There are a few lessons that Nigeria can learn from other African nations who've had to go down the route of the subsidy removal, bit the bullet and had to face it because, as has been mentioned a number of times, it is not sustainable in the long run. In fact, only recently in 2021, Zambian President Michael Sata had mentioned that they couldn't continue to fund energy subsidy when he could channel that fund to towards health and education. And this has been the call as well for us here in Nigeria. Earlier, the Minister of Finance, Budget and Economy had talked about the fact that they subsidize petroleum to the tune of about 400 million naira per month for Nigeria alone. That money could be better used. And so no issues there around the importance of this. However, learning from other African countries, there are a few lessons that we can borrow, or few ways that we can successfully achieve a removal of fuel subsidy. One of which is what is, this securing of the $800 million fund from World Bank to cushion the effect. The 50 million Nigerians and the 10 million households that have been identified will be gotten from the National Social Register, which is a register that captures a database of the most vulnerable and poorest Nigerians. There are a number of interventions that have gone through it, and it's from this register as well that we had the COVID palliative distribution and some other interventions, social interventions in Nigeria. So that's where the pool of people are coming in from. However, when you look at the number of people and the larger number of people that will be affected, if we have 200 million Nigerians in terms of population, this is just 1/4, 25% of the population who could potentially be affected by fuel subsidy. Of course, in the short term, we look at the potential rise in price of pump fuel, consequent rise in food, in cost of food. We already have an food inflation crisis in Nigeria, potential food inflation crisis in Nigeria, and this would not help. However, as we've mentioned, three things the government should look at. Number one is government interventions like this, whereby they're able to support or provide a safety net for the most vulnerable. Number two is proper communication. And this is something I must mention, that the government has to be honest with Nigerians in terms of the effect of removal of subsidy in the short term, whilst putting that side by side with the benefits in the medium and long term of the removal of subsidy. The reason why the Nigerian Labour Congress can come out and talk about the fact that it's going to be chaotic if subsidy is removed is because this is part of information management. When you have people saying that don't remove subsidy is going to be terrible for Nigerians, then there's a resistance by the people because they see it as just the government exacerbating the hardship of Nigerians. However, whilst being honest with regards to what the immediate effect would be, it is important to also assure Nigerians of the fact that there will be other areas that would benefit from this, and also be transparent in how they use the savings from fuel subsidy to benefit, the masses in terms of Nigerians. What we're looking forward to finally in this regard is a clear and transparent process of managing these funds that have come from the World Bank. How would this be disbursed? Hope it would get to the most vulnerable people, and that Nigerians begin to get ready for a time when subsidy will be fully removed and the immediate impact of this on the most vulnerable in Nigeria. Well, moving on, Olusegun Obasanjo has pleaded with the Central Criminal Court, Old Bailey, United Kingdom, and the government of the United Kingdom to temper justice with mercy in the case of organ harvesting, for which the former Deputy Senate President, Senator Ike Ekweremadu, and his wife had been found guilty. The UK court had found the trio of the former Deputy Senate President, his wife Beatrice, a Dr. Obi Naubeta, guilty of conspiring to arrange the travel of a 21-year-old from Nigeria to the UK in order to harvest organs for their daughter Sonia. However, in a letter dated April 3, 2023, and addressed to the Chief Clerk, the Central Criminal Court, Old Bailey, Obasanjo stated Ekweremadu's qualities which could qualify him to deserve clemency of the UK government and the court. According to Obasanjo, Ekweremadu's conferment with the coveted national honor of Commander of the Federal Republic was further testimony to his selfless service to our country, Nigeria. Well, Dr. Abati.
Well, first, I think that this is a very commendable intervention by President Olusegun Obasanjo, Nigerian statesman, global eminent person. What he has done is to plead for clemency. In law, it's called a character witness. In other words, when somebody says, oh, this person, on the basis of good conduct, deserves clemency. Within the scope of the procedure itself, of the trial itself, it's called allocutors. But here in Nigeria, and I think also in the UK jurisdiction, the allocutors is to be presented by the person himself. by the defendant for it to be admissible. And in Nigeria also, the Supreme Court in Francis versus Federal Government of Nigeria had also said that, look, allocutors can only be presented by, the defendant. But in this case, it's not a case of allocutors. This is diplomacy. This is, President Olusegun Obasanjo providing character witness. The only question that will arise here is that, okay, can you offer character witness after the fact? After the case has gone through trial and it has gone to conviction and its sentencing is required. Well, and is such an intervention admissible, within the jurisdiction? So while the intervention is a very good statesmanly one, the questions arising therefrom will be, will the court be moved by it? And will it have an impact on, what the Old Bailey Court, the Crown Court, decides in this particular case that has been regarded as a landmark test for the Modern Slavery Act of the United Kingdom. But, the other thing to note is to give examples. It happens. When Margaret Thatcher's son, I think his name is Mark Thatcher, was, involved in a case in Equatorial Guinea, accused of colluding with some persons to engage in a regime change. There was an intervention. And that intervention was described as diplomacy to make sure that, the UK authorities provided support for him. So it's a kind of thing also that I think President Obasanjo is trying to do. And I'm sure he must have been appropriately advised by his lawyers before this intervention. And that will strengthen, the hands of the defendant. And it must be noted that the plea by President Obasanjo is for Ekweremadu and his wife on the basis of good character. So good character evidence, witness, may be of interest to the court, even outside the fact. What may not be acceptable to the court is bad character evidence, which may be considered prejudicial in the light of the Criminal Justice Act of the United Kingdom of 2003. And I've referred to that bad character evidence witness, so that some people, some enemies of Ekweremadu, don't now stand up and say, oh, what Obasanjo has done is not good. No, that will be of no relevance, because it will be considered malicious. The Criminal Justice Act of the UK, 2003, finds bad character witness or evidence inadmissible. So nobody should politicize this. And that's why I keep insisting what President Obasanjo has done is perfectly welcome. Now, you'll recall that when Ekweremadu and his wife were applying for bail, if it was in fact the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission of Nigeria that contacted the Metropolitan Police and brought up an issue about forfeiture of assets by Ekweremadu. So Ekweremadu was disappointed by his own country. And it took Justice Inyangekwo in a federal high court matter to berate the Nigerian government through the EFCC for trying to further complicate matters for Senator Ekweremadu. I think that the Buhari administration still has an opportunity, to also step into the matter, to say, as President Obasanjo has pointed out, this is a man who has served his country well. We think he's a man of good character. As Obasanjo has argued, he was acting not for commercial purposes, but as a parent looking out for his child. And that the Nigerian government believes that, the court should temper justice with mercy. And it's not too late, because this same Nigerian government, when one lady had issues somewhere in the Middle East, the same Nigerian government stepped in a drug-related matter and got the girl freed. So why is the attitude of the Nigerian government different in the Ekweremadu case? So, that's another matter that can be raised. But what everybody should note, however, is that this kind of good character witness intervention does not mean that the matter will be wiped away. It's dependent on the feelings of the court. The court may well be unmoved. There's nothing anybody can do about that. Secondly, it's persuasive. The intervention has persuasive value. It doesn't have probative value. Whatever were probative value will have applied when the matter was on. And that's why I thought that, you know, the defense counsel for Ekweremadu, they also mismanaged the matter. Maybe they were confident that, they had a good case and that they would, but the Modern Slavery Act provides a provision whereby if you go for summary trial means you just plead guilty and then, you know, the court says on the basis of that, the penalty, if you look at sections 1 to 4 of the Modern Slavery Act of the UK, you know, it's not as severe as if you go through complete trial. But we hope that a global eminent person like President Obasanjo will also be able to mobilize other global eminent persons in support of Senator Ekweremadu and his wife. It doesn't. This intervention, we must note, does not apply to the doctor, one Dr. Obeta. And President Obasanjo's lawyers must have advised him where he didn't talk about the doctor, who may have been involved in this for commercial reasons. But this is a good character witness intervention. Let's see how it plays out. But just note that the court may ignore it, but it works in other jurisdictions.
Absolutely. What former President Olusegun Obasanjo is pleading for is clemency, mercy, perhaps for the judgment or perhaps convictions, which is set for May 5 by the presiding judge to be tempered with mercy if based on good character, as he highlighted in his letter. As Dr. Bated mentioned, the strength of this would be, number one, the status of President Olusegun Obasanjo as a former president, an elder statesman, and also well-respected in the international community, thereby lending voice or perhaps power to his voice through his letter. Another aspect, of course, would be the merit of the letter he's written, and if the UK court would consider that. In previous cases, it has shown in through immigration cases and other cases as such. However, because this is a criminal case, and the fact that it is a landmark one would wonder if the UK would want to make an example out of Senator Ike Ekweremadu, or perhaps listen to emissaries from not just President Olusegun Obasanjo, but hopefully the Nigerian government would also write in support of a former Deputy Senate President. However, as has been said a number of times, there are lessons to be learned from this particular episode. And that is that in countries like the United Kingdom, no one is more equal than the other, and no one is above the law. Therefore, one doesn't get protection or perhaps different sets of justice because of your status or the name that you carry. I mean, we've been following the conviction or perhaps the trial or the appearance of former President Donald Trump to speak for what he had done in the past. And so we see in modern society how the judiciary works. It is not a respecter of persons. It is fair to both the poor and the rich. However, as has been said, due to perhaps the motive behind his actions, we're hopeful that the court would consider some of these pleas by eminent personalities, including now former President Olusegun Obasanjo. We continue to follow this case. Sentencing happens on the 5th of May, and we'll see if indeed they would recognize and grant him clemency, and his clemency plea would be considered.